Hello, this is David Gordon-Koch reporting for the NB Media Co-op from Moncton. I'm here at the National Farmers Union Convention where the keynote talk just wrapped up. It featured Charlie Angus and Britt Griffin. The pair spoke about their experiences in social justice organizing, the rising threat of neo-fascism, and much more.
My mom called me and said, I can't sit and watch children starve to death. I'm going to stand out in the street with my walker. And I said, what are you going to have on your sign, Mom? She said, Grandmothers Against Genocide. And that started the Grandmothers Against Genocide. My mother was just going to stand out on the street corner. And 15 women came the first, and then 40. And then they started to break into other communities. People who hadn't done this do it. And will that make a change? I don't know. But when our world leaders stand back and watch children being starved to death, then your job is to stand out in the street. Like, if our leaders aren't going to do it, then it falls to you. And I think that this is how we push back. We gave so much ground to the fascists because we professionalized change.
Well, I worked as a researcher in the Natural Resources Department for Temiskaming First Nation. And I think what I came away with from, I worked with them for about 10 or 15 years, was the ability to pay attention, to look and see, and it's now my moral framework, pay attention to what's going on around me, to the people around me, to the trees and the animals and all of that. And to take the old knowledges and stories seriously. Like, they're not metaphors, they're not, folk tales or fairy tales. The stories that they have of creation and the relational nature of their connectivity to nature, they're true stories. They're history.
We'll bring you the full talk in just a moment, but first, here are the voices of some of the people who showed up for the event today.
I'm Jenn Pfenning. I'm president of the National Farmers Union. It's our annual convention, so it's also our AGM and elections. But aside from the business part of it, it's a chance to get all of us farmers in a room together talking about things that matter to us beyond the specifics of what we grow, how we grow it, from a port or ag perspective. This is talking about the policy frameworks that shape the world that we farm in and how we take our goods to market. Food sovereignty, I think it's language that isn't heard a lot outside of sort of this space.
Yeah, what does it mean?
It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And this morning, when I was, sort of kicking us off, whose sovereignty are we talking about, right? It's not something that everybody understands intuitively. Food security is a little simpler, a little more straightforward. Well, is my food secure? Is my food supply secure? Do I have enough food? Food sovereignty is much more about where is my food coming from, how is it grown, how does the source of my food interact with my sovereignty as a person, in my own person, in my community, how is my community's sovereignty impacted, and how is our nation's sovereignty impacted by the source that our food comes from. Food sovereignty is sovereignty. Without food sovereignty, without assuring our food supply as a nation, how long do we remain a sovereign nation? That's a reality I don't want to actually have to face. We can do something about it. And, we as the NFU, when this whole annexation nonsense started and the tariffs started, we already had policy pieces that we've been talking about for a long time. It was very simple, quick to put together a 6-point plan that talks about exactly what we need to do to shore up our defenses, so to speak, against this threat. By taking control of our food supply, by taking control of our markets, by taking control of the things that we really can, simply by making different policy decisions.
What's the number one policy decision that you think politicians should be looking at, should be considering?
Never give up supply management. Absolutely. No, talk to the U.S. farmers, and they will tell you what happens when you have uncontrolled market. In the U.S., what has happened is that farmers have lost control of their own livelihood, they've lost control of their market, and through vertical integration and ever bigger monopolies over certain commodities and increasing commodification of every aspect of food, what you have is a system that is designed to extract the most amount of profit for the least input. And what that does is it degrades the value of the food itself. So you have no care for how nutritious it is, what the environmental impacts are of it, whatever might be contained in it, or how it impacts the community where it's being produced. And all of those serve to absolutely destroy communities and the food system and our health and the environment.
My name is Alexis. There's a really big need for local produce, local vegetable, local food. And with everything that is happening with the tariffs and stuff, that feeling is like even greater. But we need farmers. Basically, you just need to go out there and tell people, what you want and what we can get from the farm movement. You need to empower people that they can make a change, even if they're, not a politician or not someone, higher in the hierarchy.
My name is Jenn Pfenning. I think Charlie and Britt were so good at articulating the importance of the thinking globally but acting locally piece. I do a lot of international work within the Farmers Union, and we also do advocacy at the national level and stuff like that, but their emphasis on just the community level relationships as the basis for everything else, I think is just the most important lesson in organizing. And so it's great to hear it from them and hear about their own experiences with how that makes movements effective, is actually starting with just human relationships and then going from there.
What's your name?
Tara Ramkalawan, and I work on a project called Flemo Farm. So it's a half-acre urban farm in Toronto that is a pilot project to use underused green spaces in the hydro corridors for urban agriculture. And it's in a very densely populated neighborhood where we're trying to give residents of that neighborhood the opportunity to have micro farm businesses so they can have a little side income, and we can also support the food security of the neighborhood. This is my first NFU event, and I'm a visitor, so I'm not a member yet, but I've been involved with the NFU just this year as part of their exchange program. So it's a new farmer mentoring program that they're doing. So we've just come from a retreat in just an hour away at the Broadleaf Ranch in New Brunswick. And now we're here at the convention, and I'm just interested to see more about the NFU.
So my name is Wyann Sandler. I'm a farm member from Region 1, District 3. My partner and I have a beekeeping operation and homestead in just outside Nalligitchginiich, Mi'kma'ki, also called Antigonish, Nova Scotia. And it's really such a pleasure to be hosting the NFU convention on the East Coast. It's been something that I've been hoping for since I got involved with the NFU about 5 years ago. And so it's great to see everyone here, and I'm so pleased to be hosting this discussion tonight with Charlie Angus and Britt Griffin. So I want to start off by thanking the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, the Government of Prince Edward Island, and the Government of Canada for funding the NFU's 2025 Convention keynote address. So 43 Halloweens ago, Britt Griffin and Charlie Angus moved in together in Toronto's East End. Britt was an Alberta student deeply committed to feminist and social justice issues, and Charlie was an unrepentant punk rocker. 3 years later, they were married on the Day of the Dead. So happy belated 40th anniversary. They were married by Father Michael Chersney, a Jesuit social justice warrior who's now the right hand to Pope Leo. Father Chersney's marriage invocation at Charlie and Britt's wedding was "God wants revolution." Food has always been a part of Charlie and Britt's revolution. Their wedding celebration took place at a hall where they regularly hosted a soup kitchen, and they would later homestead in Cobalt, Ontario, on the property of an abandoned mine where they grew vegetables and raised goats and chickens. Before their homesteading days between 1985 and 1990, Britt and Charlie opened and lived in a Toronto Catholic worker house inspired by Dorothy Day, where they provided housing and community to people facing homelessness, mental health challenges, and addiction. Their experiences recounted in Charlie's most recent book, Dangerous Memory, Coming of Age in the Decade of Greed. In 1990, Charlie and Britt moved to Cobalt, Ontario. They started a family and raised 3 daughters. In 1995, they started publishing their own magazine, The High Grader, with Britt as publisher and Charlie as editor. In their first issue, they promised to cover the cultural issues of the North, while never defining or limiting the definition of who was a Northerner, and to show their nonpartisan commitment to working for the sustainable future of rural and resource-based Canada. We prefer the little guy over the big guy, they wrote, and the efforts of the local over the power of the multinational. Words I think many of us resonate with. They ran their small but mighty magazine for 10 years until Charlie first took office as Member of Parliament for the Timmins-James Bay riding. Charlie Angus served for 2 decades as an NDP MP until he stepped down ahead of the recent spring election. He's been the NDP critic for ethics, natural resources, FedNor, Indigenous youth, income inequality and affordability, and the deputy critic for Labour. Charlie has published 9 books. He's a member of the Council of Canadians and was instrumental in developing the recent Pledge for Canadians that calls for all Canadians to unequivocally assert their sovereignty and to strengthen the collective tools and institutions necessary to defend and build the Canada we want, consistent with our shared commitments to inclusive democracy and human rights, equity and labor rights, environmental responsibility, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and good global citizenship. Charlie is also a songwriter, musician, and lead singer with the Juno-nominated Grievous Angels. He is currently a grassroots activist with the resistance movement in Canada. Britt Griffin is the author of the hot-off-the-press novel The Haunting of Modesto O'Brien and the climate fiction Winterman trilogy. She has written essays, musings, and articles for both print and radio. Griffin spent many years as a researcher for the Timiskaming First Nation and Algonquin community in northern Quebec. These days, she divides her time between writing and caring for her unruly yard. As NFU members know so well, sustainable farming, whether as a farm family or as a cooperative, requires working together, cultivating individual talents, and acting with, not against, the diversity of non-human life. I'm delighted to introduce Britt Griffin and Charlie Angus, who for the next hour or so will share with us how, as a couple and as community-minded and environmentally conscious individuals, they've sustained each other and the movements they've been part of. So while there's no fire, let's imagine this as a cozy fireside chat. I'm going to ask some questions to get us started, and then we're going to hand it over to everyone here to ask questions and to engage with Charlie and Britt. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
So I want to start us off by going back to that question of rurality. And so the National Farmers Union is an organization of and for thousands of farm workers and farmers in Canada working together to democratically achieve agricultural policies that ensure dignity and income security for farmers and farm workers. Throughout your working and personal lives, both of you have been staunch advocates for the dignity of rural life. We continue to witness a staggering loss of small and mid-sized family farms annually, about 3 farms a day since 2001, a trend you noticed in the High Grader magazine back in the 90s. What do you have to say about the hollowing out of our rural communities, and what do you think needs to be done to reverse this trend?
Well, Britt made me move to a rural town. I was happy to live in the city. We moved to Cobalt. Cobalt at the time had come through a devastating fire. I brought her to Cobalt just to show her how crazy the town is. The town is very crazy. And I said to her, imagine anyone moving here. And she said, this is where we're moving. Just in time for all the mines to shut down, the grocery store to shut down, the high school to shut down, the French school to shut down. And we decided this is the perfect place to move to. And we never left. And I think that it's really important to rethink rural life. The cities are becoming impossible for young people to live in. People have to make choices where they can get some control of their lives and then some autonomy. But I think if you're going to move into a rural area, you have to become part of the community. You don't get to come in and, flit in and flit out. We became part of the community. In our first 6 months, we went to every bean dinner to meet the locals. We were at every funeral. There was a funeral one time, and our daughter said, there's a funeral, how come we're not going? We embedded ourselves in community, and we realized that we were stronger in community. And I think that this is a really important time of crisis, climate crisis, uncertainty, and this is the offer we have to make for people who feel they don't have control over their lives anymore, that in rural regions, you can take that control. And I just say about a mining town, I wanted my daughters to grow up in a mining town because people have your back. They know everything you do, and they don't care what gender you sleep with or who you sleep with, as long as they know who you sleep with. And once they know that, then you're okay. But they've got your back. And I think that that's what we found in rural life, is that people, you could disagree with them on many things, but when you needed help, they'd be there. And the reciprocal is when they need help, you be there.
Can everyone hear me all right? Okay. I really liked what was said earlier about the need to put culture back into agriculture, because again, if you want to have people move to the land, it's almost like we need to tell a news story about moving to the land. And I was in a classroom of grade 5 and 6 kids at the local school, and they're all kids who are, it's not a very rich community, and there's a lot of learning challenges in that class, and they're on their screens all of the time. They're taught on their screens, they're on their screens at home, and we think, well, how are we ever going to get this generation to move to the land, to take care of, the farms or the forests? And our project was to create a creature, and we brought in dried flowers, and seed pods, and bits of branches. And their excitement and engagement in actually touching things and building things and moving was incredible. And their engagement was, because we thought, oh, this project is going to be dreadful. And it was absolutely amazing. They created fabulous creatures out of their minds. They didn't use their screens. And so I think you need to invite people into rural communities and into small towns. There needs to be space for them that makes sense to them. And I was thinking too, it is about how we talk about things, the language that we use, and the stories that we tell. So we need new stories that are going to be not like the stories we told before, but I think if we tell the right ones, I think people will come because people aren't happy where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. And in the High Grader, you told stories about farming and about, Britt, you wrote about gardening in your backyard, the site of a former mine, and you spoke about raising goats and chickens and your joy of raising them sustainably and how you loved that they were, and I quote, well cared for and spend their time on the earth poking around in the sunshine. And Charlie, you wrote about supporting Britt's gardening efforts, but you also admitted that you are, and again I quote, a man alienated from nature.
Happily. I think I said happily.
He said, give me a rake and a hoe and an inch of fertile ground and I start feeling like an extra on the chain gang in Cool Hand Luke. So what has growing food meant for both of you, and why do you think it's important to support and participate in local food systems?
Well, we're not farmers. And our yard is not in farm country. It is a small, shit-ass, scrappy piece of ground with an abandoned silver mill in the backyard. We have, in the whole cobalt camp, Cobalt was a silver town, a silver boom town at the beginning of the 20th century. We have the highest rate of arsenic contamination of anywhere in the cobalt camp because the rail bed came from the mill. And we brought in topsoil and we built the beds, the raised beds, and grew things. And over the years, I sort of have drifted a bit in how the yard is now because I think of things like the moose. So a moose has an incredible flap on its nose. So when it dives down to eat from the bottom of a pond or a river, to get the really rich greenery that's down there, the flap closes out over, it can eat all this mineral rich stuff at the bottom of the water. And then out comes the moose and it walks along and it poops everywhere along the shore and into the forest and distributes all that incredible nutrients and minerals all through the shoreline. So then there's good riparian growth. I mean, we all know this, and then so the riparian growth protects the water from being, too much sediment. And I was like, okay, well, the lesson is you treat your yard like the moose treats his yard. So it's a little chaotic, and we do grow food, but if a toad is somewhere, I just work around it. I don't ask Mr. Toad to move anymore. Mm-hmm. So it has taken on an incredible chaotic nature, but I feel if I pay enough attention, one day I will maybe be as smart intuitively as Moose is, and I will be better at taking care of my yard. But right now there's partridges and hares and toads, well not now, there's snow. But I feel like the lesson that I've learned is that I'm trying to, we always say we're all connected and, we talk about connectivity, but to really immerse yourself in it when you're a human being and has removed yourself in there's so much rupture in the way we interact with nature, to get back into it, I feel is just a slow process of paying attention.
Well, chaotic isn't the word. There are days when I come home, I say, I think one day I'm going to come home and the house will be gone, and you'll be gone, and it'll just have gone back to wilderness. It's gotten wilder and wilder and wilder. And so I build things. Like when she wanted a chicken coop, man, nothing will ever get in that chicken coop. When I ran for leader of the NDP, They said, you know, you're going to have to talk to Britt, and you guys are going to have to work out, you know, the pressures. And so I started the conversation. She said, just stop. I've heard all this stuff before. You run for leader, you're going to either run for leader or not. Either way, I get a greenhouse. I said, what? She said, spare me all the other stuff, I get a greenhouse. So when I lost, I built a monster greenhouse. So, but I do want to say that, like I say, I'm happily alienated from nature. I don't understand it, but I'm beginning to get a sense of awe. And the awe is Britt, her relationship. So one day, she said, you got to go into town and buy some eggs. I said, don't we got goddamn chickens? And she said, no, but the fox gets the eggs. I said, what? The foxes come to the property and wait. And there's this whole living thing going that I don't understand at all. But it's pretty awesome. And I think if we can redeem a beaten up old mine site, we can redeem anything. So that's kind of what we're doing.
I have to say, normally I say, it's not good to feed wildlife, so don't tell people that.
No, what you say is, I can't go out. You say you don't want the foxes to see men because men kill foxes and you don't want the fox to get used to men. So I give you and the girls can go, but not me. So
It's benched.
I'm benched, yes. So. Anyways, I don't know why, but the foxes wait and they've never bothered the chickens. And some days they sit up on the old mine and watch the chickens, but they don't come down. They got a good thing going.
Maybe one day they will.
Well, I think that leads into the next question that we wanted to ask, is sort of related to this idea about kind of changing our relationship with nature and the natural world. And so we wanted to ask you about climate change. The NFU has been the only farming organization in Canada that has consistently critiqued the role of industrial agriculture in rising greenhouse gas emissions, as well as promoted more sustainable farming practices. In Britt's Winterman trilogy, the prospect of climate catastrophe is cast as an icy dystopia. You've both been outspoken in your own ways about the existential threats of climate change. Based on your lifetimes of activism, what should we be doing to confront the reality of the climate crisis?
Well, I think there's two things. One is we are watching our planet burn, and we're watching it being sold down the river. I'm going to just say this about Mark Carney. He's different because he talked about the existential threat. So if he's going to build Northern Gateway to burn our planet, that's a different level of responsibility than Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith is a planet burner. She doesn't care. But you can't say that this is the existential threat of our time and then say, but we're going to increase another 1 million barrels a day. The planet is going to burn, and it's burning now. And we used to have summer, now we have fire season. And what's it going to be like in 20 years? And I think going along, and people are saying, don't, you know, right now, Canada's all got to stick together. I agree. I'm more elbows up than anybody right now. But building a nation doesn't mean burning a planet. So we have to be stronger. But I also think we cannot give in to despair. Young people need to know no matter what happens, there's a future. And we'll build whatever future we have. And that's our commitment as older people. I went to this event with a very famous green person where we were supposed to do this big, what do they call them, those dream catchers. And we were on Parliament Hill, and there's a big giant dream catcher. And so everyone was supposed to say something at one of the corners of the dream catcher. And this very famous green person said, oh my God, we only have 1,000 days left. I was like, what? Well, 1,000 days left to the tipping point. And I was like, well, freak, man, if we only have 1,000 days left, why am I standing holding the stupid string, right? Like, what, if, like, is that your solution? We got 1,000 days left and we're standing holding string? I don't believe we have 1,000 days left. We have the time it takes. The planet's burning. We have to be fiery and pushing back, but we can't give in to this sort of well, it's too late, we can't do anything, it's going to be, you always have to hope. You always got to believe that nature can restore wherever, and our job is to restore and protect whatever ground we've got, is to protect that ground. And that ground is Canada right now.
Yeah, climate change is a tough one because you don't want to slide into that despair, but you have to be clear-eyed, and we are in a really bad way, and we're taking everyone with us. But I think, I don't know if I'm hopeful or not hopeful, but I feel that a big part of the job is to imagine a future that works. And I think, so I read this book by this Indigenous scholar about wolves being the first domesticated animal, that how humans and wolves co-evolved together. They weren't pets, they were hunters together, and they worked together. And his theory was that a wolf who was maybe thrown out of her pack would start hanging around the camp, and then they would start working together. It was a pretty convincing claim. Then when settlers came and they would see these big dogs with Indigenous communities, they were like, that's a dog, because they couldn't imagine. In their minds, it was impossible that that was a wolf, because that's not what wolves were. So their imagination was fettered from the get-go. They couldn't see what was there, what was really there, so they just called them dogs, because they'd already shut out parts of their imagination that could picture things differently. And to me, it's like, this is a muscle, and there's clues and there's evidence and there's inspiration everywhere. We just have to, it's sort of like unfettering things inside of our head so that, all of the things that we have lost, we could regain, but we could picture something different of ourselves in nature, and it probably isn't going to look like this. We probably aren't going to hop in our car and drive to the grocery store and buy our avocados. It's going to be something very different. But maybe, maybe there'll be toads and wolves with us. I don't know.
I just want to interrupt there.
Go ahead.
Because when you worked at Timiskaming First Nation with those young Indigenous women, and we had an infestation of something, some bug. And we always write about these as like threats and invasions. And you said that Tara and them were looking at the trees and saying, well, I wonder what they're trying to tell us, right? Like, if we're having whatever, tent caterpillars or whatever, we see invasion, threat, response. Whereas they're looking and saying, well, nature brought these for a reason. Why aren't we learning why they're here? And that's such a non-Western way of looking at it. And when you told me that, ever since then, I've been thinking about things in a different way, because we have to think, what is it actually, what is the world telling us as we see this, as opposed to, oh, we'll do this and we'll put up concrete barriers on the sea, and we'll put domes over our city so our kids don't choke on smoke. Well, nature's telling us something. What is it telling us, and what do we have to do?
Yeah, I think it's being present and paying attention are the first steps to unleashing sort of our imaginational muscle.
Yeah. I keep forgetting that I have this mic on my lapel, and everything you're saying, I'm just like, and I realize that you can hear me, so we'll try not to do that. But I was reading a book called What If We Get It Right, about the climate crisis, and this idea about imagining the possible futures that, that we have to be able to vision what it looks like to get it right and to reimagine our relationship with nature and each other. We wanted to continue talking a little bit about, farming and the environment. So in addition to being on the forefront of agricultural climate solutions, the NFU has repeatedly protested a myriad of environmental threats to our soil and water, from aggregate extraction and oil pipelines to the over-application of pesticides and fertilizers. Respecting and appreciating nature is clearly something that the NFU farmers share with both of you. Some of the most powerful muckraking in the High Grader were articles on the proposed Adams Mine dump in Kirkland Lake and the attempts by a former Monsanto engineer to erect a PCB incinerator in Northern Ontario. Many of these articles highlighted the activism, including by Northern Ontario farmers, that successfully thwarted these companies and government-led initiatives. What can you tell us about the importance of these moments of activism to your own understanding on how to affect social change? Why was the involvement of farmers so important to these actions?
Britt did all the research in the fight. I was the brass knuckles. We stopped the biggest garbage dump in North America that was going to just completely poison our groundwater. And in the middle of that, they decided they were going to import PCBs and burn them. And we had to stop that. And it was a dirty, dirty, dark fight. It went all the way. It went to the blockades. It went to the shutdown of the rail lines. Like we had to build a muscle. People just don't do a blockade. But what we learned very quickly from going to these meetings, you go to these meetings, and if you're polite, you get a dump. If you trust the process, you get a dump. That's how it's set up. And so at each meeting, farmers would ask about the groundwater. And we had these experts. And the experts would always say they'd answer the question at the next meeting, and they never did. And I remember looking at the farmers and thinking, they know what this is. These guys don't have a clue about groundwater. And you understand from people who have an understanding of the land that if they're not buying it, I don't care how many degrees this guy's got. These degrees, the promoter paid for these degrees to come and lie to us. But you don't just then become a mass movement, you have to build a movement. And so in our region, which is very rural, hard rock mining, rural farm belt, and our farm belt was split in the middle between Francophone, Catholic, and kind of English Bible Belt. And some of those communities had never spoken to each other. Well, there was only one fight in our region. It was against the garbage. So we had to start to talk to one another. And we were on the Quebec border. So we had to start doing things with Quebec neighbors. So when we had rallies, they had to be bilingual. They had to have farmers. Miners. The miners understood the groundwater as well as the farmers because water runs through mines. And so we started to use their expertise. But nobody had talked to the First Nations. And the First Nations, Temiskaming, particularly First Nation, ended up playing a huge role. And so we had to put all our politics to the side and build this movement of resistance. And then we had to practice the muscle of resistance so that we didn't just set up a blockade. You just don't do that. We had to build people. We had to build their confidence. And part of that was teaching people. Every meeting was a teaching process. Every meeting, there was an action. So Britt and her team would do the research. When we were taking on this PCB incinerator, it all looked really complex. And we couldn't afford people to do the studies. So there was you and Linda Miller, and there was 5 or 6 of you guys. You started going through their submission and you realized this is all bogus. So then we started to write questions and then start to teach people. And so then people became the experts in why these projects were so dangerous. And we empowered people. And when people were empowered, you can't beat them. So it was a 15-year fight. And after the end of that 15 years, for me, there was no going back to life as normal. So when I first went into Parliament, I was thinking about that the other day. I used to just casually throw people over the boards if they were in my way. I didn't even think twice. Because in that dump fight, it was vicious. It was hard. We gave no ground. So when I first went to Parliament, I wasn't all peace and love, guys. It's like, you screw us over, you go over the boards. And people are like, why are you so aggressive? It's like, that was the dump wars. The dump wars were hard and vicious, but we built a sense of community, and that community never wavered after that. The relationships that were built between the rural people and then the urban people and the environmentalists and the miners and the indigenous, those relationships remained strong after that. We all became a region in a way that we had never been a region before. We were all parts of a region, but we were now a people. Yeah?
Yeah. It's good. Yeah. That's it.
She did all the research.
You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Well, we wanted to get into, I think you've started to talk about this, we wanted to talk about Indigenous allyship and relationship. And so the NFU has an Indigenous-led deer hide protocol. You may have seen it when you walked in. That's sort of it's like our policy or our guidance around how we want to be in relationship. And that's been developed with our Indigenous members and leadership, and we continue to explore how to be an ally to the First Peoples of Turtle Island and build relationship. And tomorrow evening, our Indigenous leaders, alongside Riley Yesno, a queer Anishinaabe scholar from the Yellowhead Institute, are going to be leading a learning circle on land back. And so both of you have worked closely and developed relationships with Northern Ontario First Nations. In the High Grader, Charlie covered the Barrier Lake standoff in 2001, and in 2015, you published Children of the Broken Treaty, Canada's Lost Promise, and One Girl's Dream, which helped expose the system of apartheid in Canada and extolled the leadership of the late Shannon Kustachin, a young Cree woman who inspired the largest youth-led rights movement in Canadian history. And Britt, you've also written about Indigenous activists and told personal stories of going out with the Algonquin to hunt wild geese and other game. And so I wonder if you could both tell us a little bit about the ways you've built relationships with Indigenous people and what it means for you to be an ally and an accomplice in the fight for Indigenous sovereignty.
You go first.
Okay. Well, I worked as a researcher in the Natural Resources Department for Temiskaming First Nation. And I think what I came away with from, I worked with them for about 10 or 15 years, was the ability to pay attention, to look and see, and it's now my moral framework, pay attention to what's going on around me, to the people around me, to the trees and the animals and all of that. And to take the old knowledges and stories seriously. Like they're not metaphors, they're not, folk tales or fairy tales. The stories that they have of creation and the relational nature of their connectivity to nature, they're true stories. They're history. And so I thought about that a lot, and my people going back are Irish on both sides. My grandparents was a generation that came over to Canada, and they were farm laborers in Ireland. So, Ireland was the testing ground for everything that they did, that the British Empire did to Indigenous people here. They tried it out in Ireland. They took away the language. They took away the land. They basically they pushed them into certain areas of the country. The similarities are staggering. So I thought, well, I should, I'll go back to Ireland and do that sort of, diaspora pilgrimage thing. So my daughter and I went. And there would be fields. It's a small place, but there would be these fields, and then there'd be like a rock. And that rock, you didn't go near that rock. You mowed around that rock, you paid your respects to that rock because it had some sort of ancient lore to it. And everyone still remembered that. And even, people out there with their, John Deere, whatever, respected that rock. And it made me realize that First Nations and any people with a connection to old traditions, there's an intimacy with the land. Like they know that land. They don't know that guy down there over there, his piece of land, but this piece or the place where I hunt, they really, really know it because they pay attention. And so we were looking at a map, it was from 1911 of Ontario. And you see where how far they'd gotten surveying the railway, and all of the places have English names, the rivers, the tributaries. And then where it became not of interest, not worth anything, nothing to just extract here, the names were still indigenous. And they were very particular, you know, like long descriptive names of this water body, or like a place where someone's family had lived for a long time. So it was just like Polson's Point, you know. So very different way of understanding the relationship with the land. And I think that has helped me better understand that the only way we're going to get out of our mess that we're in is to really love the place that we're at. Wherever we're at, doesn't matter if it's, you know, Church and Wellesley in Toronto, or Portage and Main in Winnipeg, or my little backyard. Where you are, you take care of it as best you can.
I don't know where to begin because there's so many things I've learned. But certainly Shannon Kustashian changed my life. She was 13. And the inequity and the injustice those children faced, it's hard to describe. Kids dropping out of school in grade 3, kids being educated on a poison site where children were dying of cancers. And everybody knew it was a problem. Nobody thought it was a priority. And when they discovered the diamond mine just near Attawapiskat, people flew in from all over the world. They built a world-class diamond mine, and they couldn't build a school for children in Attawapiskat. And Shannon taught me that children have only one childhood, and once it's gone, it never comes back. And she lived with Britt and I still don't know how to describe Shannon. She was here for a time. But I'll just tell you this about respect if you're going to work with First Nation communities. Don't be performative. They don't need hugs. It's about respect. So at one point during the Attawapiskat school fight, it was very toxic with the Harper government. It was very, very nasty, and the government hated my guts. And I was worried that I was screwing it up for the community because we desperately needed that school. So we held a meeting in Timmins where the school officials from Attawapiskat and the band council came down, and we were going to have this meeting. And so we had John B. Nakaji, who was the chair, and then everybody was going to introduce themselves, and then I had these 3 scenarios. And one scenario was that I get out of the picture altogether. Maybe I'm the problem. Anyway, so John B. introduces, and we go around the circle, and the first person introduces himself. The second person introduces himself and starts to talk. The third person starts to cry and starts talking about St. Anne's Residential School. And then the next person spoke for 20 minutes, and the next person spoke for about an hour about her daughter dying of suicide. And by the time we got around, we were 2.5 hours in. And I was like, God almighty, we need to get to a meeting. We got to get a plan. And so then it was lunch. And so they live in a flying community, so everybody went to Walmart to get food, to get diapers, to get everything. So that was another hour and a half. And then they came back, and John B. said, that was a great meeting. And I was very frustrated. And I said, we didn't decide anything. And he said, weren't you listening? And the lesson was, I was the white guy. They didn't care what my scenarios were. They told me their grief of what had happened to their children was a way of saying, you go and do what has to get done. And I remember sitting there, and John said, weren't you listening? They told me what the issue was. This is our grief, fix it. And I never doubted after that a mandate. I never felt I had to go and ask for a mandate. If you have a mandate, you have a mandate. Don't go and doubt yourself. The mandate was given to me, and I never doubted myself after that, and we got that school built. So that was a lesson that I never learned at any white person's meeting. And you know, they make a joke about Indian time. Indian time being like supposed to start at 10, it might start at 2. Indian time is slow until Indian time is fast. And when Indian time is fast, decisions are made, and the white people are still taking their coats off. So when you see Indian time in action, it's working on a whole different realm. And when decisions are made, boy, things move. So They may go slow for a long, long, long time, and then the decision's made, and you're not even sure how it happened. And I've been in 100 meetings like that, and then there's unity. So just go with respect, and you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, thanks for that. We wanted to turn to the topic of women, gender, and feminism. So women have long held important leadership roles in the National Farmers Union. Our Women's Caucus is bringing forward to this convention a resolution declaring intimate partner violence as an epidemic. Britt, ideas about gender and relationships to nature abound in your prose and often show up in startling and unique ways. So we'd love to hear from you what feminism means to you, and why do you feel it's especially important to think about and build women's power in rural areas?
We had an argument earlier about whether these were hard questions or not. He said he thought they were straightforward. I find them really difficult. But, I mean, I was a very young feminist. I turned 18 and I volunteered at a rape crisis center. I was still living at home, and we'd be taking emergency calls at night and going to the police station, and that was way out of my wheelhouse. And I think because I was young, it radicalized me pretty quickly, I think, about power dynamics and how those patriarchal structures, I mean, it is individuals who, with intimate partner violence or rape or whatever it is, it's individuals who do it, but it is the patriarchal structure that makes it possible for all of this to keep happening. I mean, people are having the same conversations that I was having in 1979. And I can't believe it. I can't believe we're back to talking, the Me Too and that case of the hockey players with that young woman. I can't believe it. But I see no choice but to be a feminist, to embrace the traditions that feminism has developed, and it's still evolving. People have different ideas about what kind of feminist they are or not. I just feel like we just have to keep kicking at it all. But I think, like, for something, you look at rural women and there aren't as many resources, and so, something happens to a woman in a rural area, it's more likely gun violence because there's more likely guns in the house. I mean, there is a narrative that speaks to the vulnerability, which is fine. But I think what I've tried to do in my creative work is have the narrative of strength. So we have a lot of traditions and a lot of imagery of what makes women strong. I mean, everyone from Medusa to witches and herbalists to the Morrigan in Irish literature, which were these big female beasts. Like, female creativity is frightening to people. It's frightening to the patriarchy. It is probably the scariest thing for them. So rather than, yes, violence happens against women, but I think what we need to start doing is saying, well, we can be as strong and as scary as we have to be to beat this kind of weird incel shit that's happening now, to beat it back into the basements where it belongs. I just feel that those strengths are so old and established and recognized that not to draw on them is a mistake. So again, it's the stories we tell ourselves about, who am I? Am I scared to walk down the street? Sometimes. But fuck, next time, like, someone says something to me that I don't like, I'm going to say something back and take that ground. And I think if we start to do those things, doesn't matter if someone says something racist or sexist or something's just stupid, to take that ground back and say, don't be an asshole, you know? That's it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of stupid, we're going to turn to tariffs, Trump, and threats of annexation. So, Charlie, since Trump's second inauguration, you've become an important voice in the Elbows Up resistance movement that has galvanized Canadians from coast to coast against Trump's tariffs and annexation threats. Britt, while you might not be as vocal publicly, we'd also like to know your thoughts on this political moment. The NFU's been leading its own campaign, calling on the government to invest in local food systems so that we can create greater food security in this country and become less reliant on foreign exports. So after decades of free trade agreements that proved to be economically disadvantageous for workers and farmers in this country, and now in this new era of tariffs and annexation threats, how do we convince our governments that they need to invest in local resiliency and self-sufficiency and not negotiate with tyrants?
Well, all I do these days is study fascism and speak. And the reason I speak is because nobody is coming to save us. But Canadians have stepped up in a way that is profound. You're just never going to hear it on the CBC. You're just not going to hear it. The power of the boycott, it has to be framed. I mean, the boycott is the tool that the powerless have always used. Going back to, who did you tell me his name was? Oh, Mr. Boycott. Britt said, you don't even know the history of the boycott. She had to lecture me. I didn't know the history of the boycott. Why? Because it started in Ireland? I guess so. I was quoting Rosa Parks and Mahatma Gandhi and the Grape Boycott. My mom came home from Mass one day, and we didn't eat grapes for 40 years because they said from the pulpit, we're supporting the Mexican and Filipino farm workers, and we stopped eating grapes. We never ate grapes again. We still don't even really eat grapes. That's the power of the boycott. But this boycott is different. It is the first boycott in history that wasn't organized. People just did it. That's extremely profound. And, you know, I mean, again, I'm kicking our mainstream media, but they are not able to deal with the moment, because if I keep dropping F-bombs, so I'm never on TV anymore, because if I say fascist, well, how do you know they're fascist? No, they have to have someone who say, well, they're not really fascist. No, we're way beyond that. But every now and then I get a call about the boycott. And I said, why are you calling me? You guys aren't going to do this story, are you? Because your story was, Canadians were all like really elbows up in the spring, and then it kind of tapered out. Well, it hasn't tapered out. And I'm saying this because I'm following the US media. It's really daunting. I mean, we wiped out the US wine industry export market. We wiped it out. 97% collapse. There's nothing to compare that to. A 97% collapse is an absolute destruction of a market, and the market doesn't come back. 85% in spirits. Yeah, and so I'm really on about the snowbird boycott is going to have maximum impact over the winter. So if we can choose to pull money out in such an extraordinary manner, then we can choose where to put the money. And I think we're at this moment where we have to stop being defensive and he's not going away. The fascist threat's not going away. So we have to decide what kind of nation are we going to be from here on in. And nation building isn't Northern Gateway Pipeline. Not in a million years. But nation building is people right now, they want local, they want regional, and they don't want American. So how do we get food security and food sovereignty? How do we make that nation building? These are opportunities. We have this window, and it may fritter away, but we have a window right now to imagine a nation that will be the envy of the world. And I'm going to just end on this because I could talk for hours about it, obviously. Every day I talk to people from around the world. they contact me through my work with Midas Canada. They see Canada as a light in a dark time. You may not feel it, but the world sees us, that we're holding a line, and that we're holding a line together, regardless of Danielle Smith's bogosity. Albertans are holding the line. Saskatchewan is holding the line. Prince Edward Island's holding the line. Canada's holding the line. So we either hold it until we get tired, or we hold it and say, now we advance. And I think the National Farmers Union, you are in one of the unique positions because you've been thinking about this, you've been doing it. I don't know how to make food sovereignty. Frick, what do I know about that, right? I'm a boy from a mining town, but you know. But we have people ready to move, people ready to take action, people who call me every day and say, how do we do it? What are the tools? What are the 5 steps? What are the 4 steps? So I think we have to now start pressuring our politicians to say, it's not good enough to just get by. We want a nation that's going to be truly democratic in a dark time. And this is our moment. And it's for all the fear and danger, and I think the danger is very dangerous of what could happen. But the possibility is enormous. And so your organization is so uniquely set up for this, to seize that, because you've got people ready now. When they go into the shops, people phone me every day and they're mad as hell at Sobeys. They don't want to see that American green on the shelves. We want local, we want regional. Where is it? How do we get it? Well, then let's start that conversation so that we make that regional food security, national food security a priority.
I like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I don't
Britt?
have too much to add. I guess the only thing I would say is that when we start, if we take those steps forward and we keep pushing back, a lot of people are going to be, it's hard. Things are expensive, people are suffering down there, people are suffering here. So as we step forward, I feel that things like radical kindness is something that we need to start practicing and to strengthen within our own communities, to be hyper-local in some way in our focus, find out who in our communities are vulnerable and who needs our help, what do they need, to be almost bold about starting to reach out to one another and to just be more useful to one another. Because people are really suffering, and it's, unless we hold each other up, it's very difficult to take this step forward.
I feel like we sort of have already gone into this next question. We wanted to talk more about sort of like the rise of fascism and authoritarianism around the globe and here at home as well. Is there anything you want to add about sort of advice that you have for us to collectively protect people and the planet in sort of light of this rising wave of fascism and authoritarianism?
We got to take the ground back. So kill Zoom. Got to kill Zoom. You're not going to change the world sitting in your jammies, talking to people of like mind. You got to get out. You got to meet people, and you got to ask people who aren't involved to get involved. That's how change happens. My mother called me one day. My mother goes to Mass every day. My mother came from the non-political wing of the Angus family because everyone else had opinions. My mother didn't get an opportunity to have opinions, and my mom called me and said, I can't sit and watch children starve to death. I'm going to stand out in the street with my walker. And I said, what are you going to have on your sign, Mom? She said, Grandmothers Against Genocide. And that started the Grandmothers Against Genocide. My mother was just going to stand out on the street corner, and 15 women came the first, and then 40, and then they started to break into other communities. People who hadn't done this do it. And will that make a change? I don't know. But when our world leaders stand back and watch children being starved to death, then your job is to stand out in the street. Like, if our leaders aren't going to do it, then it falls to you. And I think that this is how we push back. We gave so much ground to the fascists because we professionalized change. You know, coming from the New Democratic Party, I probably never would have joined the party. If Bill McBain hadn't driven up on his every 6 months he'd be signing memberships. And he would come to our house, and one time he was so depressed because he hadn't signed any memberships, and he begged me to sign a membership card. That was the old school of organizing. Now we have pollsters. Nothing wrong with pollsters, but they're all wrong. We have data points. You know, we have people who talk about, you know, the campaigns they don't know what working class people are like. Meanwhile, the far right were using our former tactics and going and organizing people. And they were building these movements that became more and more radicalized while we became more professionalized. And then we were shocked. We gave up ground. So we have to take ground back, and we're going to have to do it at the grassroots. It has to start at the neighborhood level. It has to start in the community. It has to start by you going to someone and saying, you really need to come out. I need you to be there. You're going to feel stronger if you come out. It's the web of building democracy from the grassroots up. And we're gonna push them back because they're not all that smart. And they're special snowflakes. They really get upset when you challenge them. Well, we're taking the ground back. So.
Good.
I just want to put in a plug for the presentation and some of the discussion that we're going to have on Friday, which I think is really about that, about building grassroots power, about organizing in community. And I think the NFU has a long history of doing that, and I think we need to really be exercising those muscles. I want to turn back before we open it up to the floor, so we're coming to the end of the questions that I have here, but I want to circle back to the personal. And so NFU farmers, we work together as families, as cooperatives, and as part of our communities. And you've both played such important roles in your respective communities to advance social and environmental movement building. How have you supported each other's unique strengths and leadership qualities over the past 43 years? In what ways do you each engage with your communities differently? And what can you say about the importance of those differences?
Go.
Well, we move through the world really differently. I mean, okay, like he's super showy. Like,
Bought this suit, come on.
and I hide in my yard a lot. My contact in the community is, I volunteer at my museum. I'm very local. So if it's not like this part of my yard, and everything I write is about my yard. I go out into my community, I'm involved in the museum, I help my neighbors, I do that kind of thing. And I try and just stay out of his way because he's he's got a lot of different kinds of energy, and it's very outward. So I feel like maybe we just ended up sort of balancing each other out with that. I don't know.
When I said I was going to run for politics, she said, "You come home sounding like a politician and I'll smother you." I asked her if she would keep that promise. She said, "Oh yeah." We're very different than we were when we were 19 and 22. And people change a lot. And very few of the people that we knew when we were 19 and 22 stayed together. It's not we were any better. Your life changes you. And you have to learn to change with each other, even when you don't always understand it. So Britt is now very comfortable in the way she moves in the world, which sometimes I don't really understand, but that's how we move in the world. And so I think what roots us is, other than the fact that she doesn't like any of my albums that I bring and play, it's ideas. We talk ideas and we learn, and what you're learning is always really different from what I'm learning. But I think it's having a family that believes in ideas and a conversation. Conversation is at the end of the day. If you don't have conversation, what do you got, right? So that's what we got.
I think too in that, so there's, the stuff that he thinks about, which is, very political, very outward, and then the stuff I think about, which is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a big tangled web of something. But in those two circles, in that Venn diagram, in that part, I think, are the solutions somehow. So I think that's why we keep putting up with each other, is to try and figure out in that center part of that Venn diagram, what's the path forward.
I went out one day and she said, you need to take this picture of this aspen.
Yes, it's a tree, honey.
Not the whispering aspen. Anyways, the aspen had fallen, and so I came back with this great photo, and she said, that's not an aspen. It's like, well, frick, what, so? But like, I do learn from you about just how profoundly connected life is. I don't get it, but you see things, and the thing that, I don't know, the aspen does something anyways, whatever it does. It was a great article, but anyways, I had to go and I was trying to find it. I didn't know what it looked like. It was a tree. A tree is a tree is a tree. So anyways, but to you, all those trees represent different things. They have different powers. They have different, like, things that they do in the earth. So we're learning, I learned from you from that, right? It's like, it's something I don't know anything about. I mean, I can tell you about the Clash. I can't tell you anything about trees.
Endlessly, he could tell me about the Clash.
Yeah, so anyway.
Thank you. I feel like we have really learned something from this conversation. And I think it's been, there's been a lot of insight shared. And we want to keep it going, but we want to invite all of you into the conversation. So I think we're going to open it up now to take some questions from all of you. So I think you can come up to either of the, is there only one mic now, to the mic? Oh, it's over there. To either of the mics, and we'll just ask you to keep your question to no more than a minute, and to specify whether you're directing it to Charlie or to Britt or to both. And so the floor is yours.
Hi there. My name's Jackie. I'm from Local 316, which is Kingston, Ontario. I guess I'm directing this question to both of you, but we've talked a lot today about the NFU's work in international solidarity, and I was able to go to Vermont this year with the NFU to work with farmers there. And I felt really weird about it because it's this weird moment of elbows up and that relationship tension. And a farmer there told me, well, we're here working under this oppressive regime. So I'm curious strategically how you see in this moment of resisting fascism, how we connect to those people that are just like us, but across that border, and work in solidarity with them while resisting that fascism.
I think the boycott is vital. We have to hold the line. You know, it's like a strike. Strikes hurt. Nobody ever got anything by saying, well, the strike's important, but we know why you don't want to, why you want to cross a picket line. You know, you don't cross a picket line. Now, some people have to travel for work. I get that. I don't have a problem with that. The way I do my solidarity is that every day I'm talking to people from the United States. And I'm amazed at how many say, you need to keep this up. And we were talking at dinner, I talked to people whose families work, you know, in Kentucky bourbon. Their jobs are disintegrating around them. And they should be angry, and they write to me and say, we need you to keep doing this. We're not going to get our democracy back. Mm-hmm. So I think I make it very clear we are working with our American cousins. And our American cousins need us right now, but they also need to know that the boycott, the economic pressure is what's going to change this. Because when they start to see numbers going up, we could be going down there for a million reasons that are good. But what is going to hurt is the economic pressure. So I think we find ways to be in solidarity across the lines. We talk all the time. And of course, we're saying you guys can come up here anytime. But it's like, you know, the strike can't be broken. And we hold the line, and we're one day longer, one day stronger, as the steelworkers said when we took on Vale in Sudbury, and we lasted one day longer, and that's why we still have pensions in the mines. So it's hard, but we got to do that.
Oh, we have a question online. Sure. Just call Allison. Allison? Okay. Is it? Yeah, just ask it. Okay. Allison, can you unmute?
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you, Charlie and Britt. Well, I actually think that Mark Carney is a scarier enemy than Donald Trump, and very destructive to democracy in Canada. When so many of us depend on cars, and quite a few seem to hate bikes and public transit, how do we empower people to get Canada's government to act to reduce our carbon emissions? Since climate change is the greatest threat, what should we boycott?
Well, I think we have to keep the pressure on them. I mean, again, Mark Carney said this was the existential threat to our generation. TMX cost everybody in this room, your family, $1,500, and we're still paying for TMX. And the oil companies still don't want to pay their freight, and we're paying 50 cents on the dollar to get their oil down the pipe. And now we're going to build another pipeline for them? No, we're not going to do that. And that's fair. You know, right now for me, Mark Carney was voted in and he's the Prime Minister, and we are in a very dangerous, dangerous moment. So I'm willing to stand by him as Prime Minister, but that doesn't mean I'm going along with it. My party dropped the ball, and we paid the price, and Pierre Poilievre is a disaster. I think what worries me about our democracy right now is that we have the instability of a minority government, but we don't have opposition parties. We have a rage party that does nothing except try to disrupt Parliament, and then the New Democrats aren't sitting on any committees. So there's no checks and balances. And I'm not saying anything mean about Liberals, but I've never met a Liberal backbencher who's going to challenge his own government in committee. You don't do that. When you're on the government side, you go along. So we don't have that opposition to push back. So it falls to us. We have a Prime Minister, we have a government, we don't need an election, but we certainly can make him feel the heat about decisions that are wrong. And again, nation building. What's nation building? People living on the streets is not nation building. A national housing plan that would get our mills up and running, that we could train young generational workers so that people could live without economic insecurity. That's nation building. That would kickstart our economy. So let's talk about nation building. And I think the idea that nation building, you know, they said Canada is 3 oligarchs in a trench coat, and that's from a long time ago. Why the hell is Suncor get an inside pass on nation building? They've done nothing to build our nation except to burn it. So we hold our Prime Minister to account. That's what I say.
I'm still thinking about the last question. I'm so slow in processing things, but I think, you know, the question of driving cars or traveling or how I mean, each day we try again to be better and we try to do things differently. Every day is another chance to navigate the best way and the most strategic way to deal with the problems confronting us. And I mean, questions of international solidarity are really important. And like the talk earlier this morning, and then hearing people talk about going to Chiapas and I have a real connection to Chiapas. So, I mean, we just keep navigating these things the best way we can and supporting each other. Yeah.
Megan?
I think you were first.
Sorry, go
But
ahead.
I
Over
can't
here. Mic one.
Yes, hello. I'm Larry from Alberta, and I'm not looking for sympathy, but anyway, thank you both very much for your contribution to Canada and your dedication to the people of Canada. I'm going to refer to your one of your movies, Charlie, Northern Gold, and I think that should be. It's a documentary about the gold in Northern Ontario, and it should be in every classroom, every social studies class. There's so much history there about the labor movement, about resources. So my question is, about nation building. When is it resource development, and when is it wealth extraction? Thank you.
Well, it's always wealth extraction, but we need resources. So, again, I live in a mining town. My family were miners. My feeling is I would much rather have a mine in Canada than a Canadian mining company in Congo. We need to be able to keep an eye on the companies. I actually work pretty well with many of the mining companies, meet standards here that they won't meet elsewhere. And so there are projects that should go ahead and projects that shouldn't go ahead. So right now, I congratulated Mark Carney for the new Crawford nickel mine near Timmins, because it's right near Timmins. Timmins is heavily mined. There's a rail line, there's the infrastructure, there's hydro, there's a workforce. We need critical minerals. I'd rather be getting it from there, or it's going to come out of Malaysia. I don't want it coming out of Malaysia because they're not going to have the same standard. Ring of Fire is a whole different story. Ring of Fire, I think, is an ecological disaster with no respect for First Nation people, and it's going to have major blowback. The Indigenous communities in Treaty 9, where we're from, there already, the young people are heading up the river to stop it. So we make these decisions on a case by case. Some projects should go ahead because some projects we need. If we're going to be an industrial society, if we're going to have literally a climate future, we're going to have the EV capacity that gets us off fossil fuels. So some projects go ahead and some don't, and that's the issue. And it's going to have to happen with Indigenous. If the Indigenous community signs on, then it's possible. But what we see all too often is the attempt to break Indigenous communities from each other, which is Ring of Fire right now. 2 of the communities signed on, 2 are saying no. And they just figure as long as you don't bother talking to the 2 that say no, everything's fine. No, that's not consultation. So, so we take it as Britt and I have even disagreed on some mining projects when you worked for the Temiskaming.
Yeah, imagine that.
Imagine that. I was like, I think that's not a bad project. Anyways.
Hi, so my name's Megan. I'm from Nova Scotia. I just wanted to learn more about your perspective on the elbows up rhetoric. I've sort of had a hard time attaching to that rhetoric, especially when I saw it used by Mark Carney in his campaign materials. he ran on that and is now using that sort of messaging to justify sort of sickening spending on military and cuts to social services. So I'm just wondering how you feel about that, and whether part of that sort of nation-building, elbows-up rhetoric, if there's a way to integrate a sort of like anti-military industrial complex, like hard capitalist, all these things, like how to integrate those values that we have sort of thought of ourselves as being different than the United States when so much of that is being integrated into our current federal budget and policies.
Well, Ben Masilas from Midas Touch said, how do you feel that Mark Carney stole all your talks for the last 2 months and ran a campaign on it? And I said, well, whatever. At least someone used it. I mean, the elbows up thing came at a particular moment. When Canadians were frightened, Canadians were unsure. And when Mike Myers went on Saturday Night Live and he just said elbows up, it was a secret message to Canadians in our Canadian language, which is hockey. People don't have to like hockey, but everybody understood that Gordie Howe thing, and suddenly it galvanized us. And people need to be galvanized in a moment of threat. In terms of the military threat, the threat Canada's facing right now is dead serious. We are watching the disintegration of the international rule of law. We are probably already in the opening phases of a third global conflict. I spent my life in politics calling for peace. I feel like Cassandra now, saying it's coming. And I think we're going to have conversations about how we look at our nation. Because if Donald Trump can send the army into Portland and brag about sending it into Chicago, you don't think he's going to cross the border at Coots on a makeshift blockade put up by 3 Alberta separatists? He will do what he's going to do. And as long as we hold the line and stand strong, they're not going to do it. But Europe is disintegrating. Putin, the violence that we're seeing, and it's a deadly violence that we're seeing. And I think we can't pretend that it's going to leave us out of it. I wish I could say something else, but we're going to have to think about it. Whether or not we're buying F-35s, not a chance. That's a dead end, but we have to be ready to decide how we're going to be a nation that's democratic in a world of gangsters. So. Sorry to be a bummer.
We have a question online. Ella?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead, Ella.
Thank you. It's lovely to have both of you here tonight. Thank you. I'm very impressed with your mom and what she's doing, and I'm very impressed with the boycott movement. So I just wonder how you feel about the boycott, divest, sanction movement, and how on earth we're ever going to get some kind of democracy for Gaza and the West Bank, Palestine.
I didn't hear the end of the question.
I wonder how we're ever going to get some kind of democracy for the West Bank and Gaza and Palestine, and why we're shipping weapons through the back door to the U.S. So that Israel can use them. So there's 2 issues there. I really like the BDS movement. I think we need to do more, and I want to get your thoughts on that, but I'm very worried about us still shipping weapons to Israel through the back door to the U.S.
Well, Britt and I came up in the fight against apartheid, and we broke the apartheid regime through a boycott. And the idea that Israel soccer teams are still in international forums and Eurovision, it's like there was a genocide, there was mass war crimes being committed, and countries that commit war crimes don't get to participate in these events. We stopped Russia as soon as the war broke out. But with Israel, we tiptoe around. Again, our national broadcaster, I sometimes feel like I'm listening to the IDF news broadcast, where they'll say, Israel today rejected claims that they went and bombed a hospital and killed 300 people. Then they've got like 4 quotes from people from the Israeli military, and then they'll have someone who said, but they did. We have to be very clear in this time. This is the age of monsters. Because what's happened in Gaza is set the stage. When the international community doesn't speak up against genocide, then it makes genocide okay. And when Keir Starmer and even Canada, Mark Carney and them, they sort of tiptoe around this, we played a role in genocide. Time and time again, Canada stood up. And we're not standing up now. This will be the pattern. The pattern of what happened in Gaza will happen again because it's been made okay. So there has to be full-on boycott. Full-on boycott, total boycott, cultural boycott, academic boycott until there is peace and until the rebuilding of Gaza happens and until the people in the West Bank live in peace. And I have nothing against people in Israel. I have nothing against the state of Israel existing. That's not an argument for me. But when a country is allowed to commit genocide, there has to be consequences. So, you have the kafia.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add to that is, you know, there isn't someone coming to save us. And I looked at all those young people and older people who were on the flotillas, and they just went out and started to save each other. And they tried to get to Gaza, and they were so incredibly brave. And I think we can do it. We can stand up and not wait for someone else to fix things. You know, again, with climate change, you know, shooting things up into the clouds or building domes over the earth, like, we just have to change how we act in the world, and we have to be in solidarity with one another. And if, I don't know, whether it works or not doesn't really matter. It's the right thing to do.
You know, when I was 18, the fight against apartheid, it was like, which side are you on? And every musician was expected to take a stand. You know, when they launched a campaign against Sun City, and my band, we were 18 years old or 19, and we were going to win this award, and it was a big thing. But the award was given out by a company that had ties to South Africa, and we did not accept the award. And we were nobodies. And it probably damaged our musical career, because then people thought we were jerks in the industry. But those were lines in the sand. People took lines in the sand to stop apartheid. It took years, it took decades. But we did it, and we did it without a shot being fired. But it was everyone deciding we are not going to go along. The amount of disruptions, you know, at Alcan and Rio Tinto and that, when they would have their shareholders meetings, and people would come in and storm in, and nuns would come in, storm in, and shut the meetings down. I mean, that was how we took on apartheid. And we have to be willing to do that with Netanyahu and his band of gangsters. And that's the only way it's going to happen, because God Almighty expecting Keir Starmer and Europe and anyone else to stand up for international law, so we do. And we've done it before, and we can, and it's our job.
And I just want to say, you will have all seen in your packages that there's 2 resolutions coming forward on solidarity with Palestine, one on boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and another on other political advocacy, an arms embargo now, canceling the Israel-Canada Free Trade Agreement, or suspending it. So that's going to be, you know, something that's coming to the floor for debate in the next couple of days. I think we're going over here.
I'm going to jump the gun a bit, because I'm talking about a plan that I have that no one in this room has heard about yet. But I'm going to be traveling the country this year to have person-to-person conversations of the type that you talked about, and I want to visit everyone in this room. And so I have a question, I guess, for both of you. An outer question for Charlie. What do you want to come out of those conversations? And an inner question for Britt. How should we, I guess I would use the word ritual. What ritual should I be bringing as I have those conversations?
How are you going to do your conversations?
Let me try and fill in the gap. My goal is to talk about rebuilding the Canadian economy, which is built on the backs of farmers, and to understand what that looks like at each local level that I visit. Does that clarify enough?
Are there going to be community meetings?
There are some community meetings. I think in terms of visiting this room, they are family and friends meetings.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I actually didn't hear your question to me. I've told some people, but my hearing got mucked up on the plane, and I'm in an aquarium right now, so you have to kind of really.
Porter.
In terms of finding an inner strength, in terms of setting the tone for these meetings, what would you recommend that I bring in terms of ritual, or in terms of just setting it from an inner perspective?
I guess it's each place that you go, there will be something special about that place. You will either be on, you'll be on someone's territory for sure, to be cognizant of that, to think about what it is that has happened in that place that's of significance and bring that into the conversation. These are particular places with particular charismas and characters and stories and secrets, and to try and, I guess, tap into that energy so that they're particular conversations, not, you know, universal, I guess.
I think it's really important we have a moment to take back a vision and to establish a vision. And I think we have to get beyond, I mean, we were sold this sucker's line, you know, about, you know, globalization was going to lift all boats, and we knew it wasn't true. But we started to doubt ourselves, and we accepted the inevitability of it. And then we just started to accept crumbs and minor little changes, when the far right, they weren't accepting minor changes. They were going to blow the system up. They got what they wanted, and they still weren't happy, while we were trying to do, you know, let's just, God, I remember going to NDP meetings, and it's like, we're gonna lower bank fees on your bank card. It's like, that's what we're gonna run an election on. Yeah. Well, now we've got an opportunity. Being in history sucks, but that's our moment. So how do we rebuild an economy that's sustainable? How do we get local people involved? I think people want to be involved. I think people feel this is a moment to be involved. So that's what you're going to come back and tell us what you learned. But I think people want to be part of something, and accepting. I don't think we need to be in a position where we're accepting, you know, hoping the status quo is gone, and the other side blew it up. So we don't have to play by status quo anymore. What's the vision? What do you see, and how do we do it? Because people can have a vision, but how do we make it practical? Those are questions that I think are really important right now.
And I think too, to have an action. Like, I think what worked really well with Charlie's mom is she got fed up and she went out and she did something. And then someone else was like, well, I feel fed up too, so I'm going to go stand with her. So
the action is joining the NFU.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, exactly.
Anyway, good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Over here?
Yeah. Hi. I have a question for Charlie. Basically, you know, with the movement, with the boycott and elbows up, people like stop buying stuff from the US and wants to have produce from here. And but we need more farmers. We need more farmers to do that. And I believe that farmers are really hardworking people who want to give to the community, but the community also needs to help them, you know, to provide them with good food. So my question is how we could take that momentum, that feeling we have nationwide that, A, we want more vegetable grown here. I know how to do it locally, but how could we take that momentum nationwide to have more farmers and have communities support those farmers?
That's I put that to you, the National Farmers Union, because there is a desire right now. People are checking the products, people want to buy, and they want to support local. And I get all these great initiatives that people are doing, but it's sort of scattershot. We need a structure. And again, we talk nation building. Where is the government plan to say, it wouldn't be all that much money to build the infrastructure to get to local, to regional, to national. And certainly in some of my northern communities, in areas even where there aren't farms per se, there are now these little specialty farms that are supporting local, you know, these microeconomic operations. But we need, like in Ontario, we have FedNor, right? You know, you have COA. Why are we not using the funding agencies to put a plan? But you guys know what that plan would look like. So I think we need to start saying there is a desire. We have to we have to move on that. And we need a plan, and that will be political as well, because then you need to be able to go to your MPs and your MLAs to say, and your MPPs to say, we want this plan put in place because people want it. And I can tell you, if there is talk of a plan, Canadians, I'm on Facebook, I'm on all the social media all day, every day, right? People are looking for it. There's all kinds of groups out there trying to track and trying to connect, but it's all scattershot. So this is what the NFU, this is what you guys are set up to do. So I say, go to it.
And I'm gonna add to that. Basically, like you said earlier, like we should not wait for them.
Yeah.
Like basically, hey, we have a plan. We want to feed Canada. Are you in or not?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I think, at least.
Yeah.
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 Thank you.
Merci.
Okay, we'll go to an online question. Jane? Jade? Oh, Jay? Jay, do you want to come off mute?
Yes. Hi. Hello, Charlie. Charlie, I'm wondering, what is it that Mark Carney is most afraid of now? In other words, how best to get a message through to Mark Carney? I mean, I think the most critical thing we're dealing with these days now is the climate crisis. And for instance, Mark Carney is developing liquid natural gas projects on the West Coast, which is a horrendous idea. That's not the only thing we want to get our message through to Mark Carney. But how do we best do that? What's his sensitive point? Where can we best get our leverage? What do you think?
We have a prime minister who is very, very, very on the record about the existential threat. So his words matter. LNG, I mean, Canada's a petrostate. So you're not going to see in the media anyone talking about the massive methane bomb that is LNG. It's like, we've got to get our product to market. We've got to get it out there. This is nation building. He just didn't want to stand up and say, well, what about, like how Danielle Smith blew $77 billion of clean energy projects out, chased it out of Alberta. The two locations in North America for clean energy, Saskatchewan and Alberta. You can't even compare anywhere else to what they could do. And Saskatchewan and Alberta, for ideological reasons, didn't want it. But Mark Carney's on the record. I think it's really important right now. We have an opportunity. This Northern Gateway is going to blow up in his face if he tries. Because once you say you're going to get rid of the tanker ban and leave the BC coast open, you are now, like, why was it that with Danielle Smith trying to burn our nation to the ground while David Eby and the BC government have been holding the line and taking massive job losses, that they'll pick a fight with BC? His Liberals are not going to, from BC, aren't going to go along with that. So I think you have to pick your fights. You can't pick all the fights, but you have to pick a fight to win. So right now, to me, if this pipeline is being talked about, that pipeline gets stopped. I've been positive about Mark Carney on a lot of stuff. It kills me, but I do that because, you know what, this is the moment we're in. And I say to Mark Carney, there's projects that'll happen and projects that won't. In my region, it's Ring of Fire. You want to start a war with First Nations? That's not how you build a nation right now. So I think you pick the struggle, but he has been very clear about he understands the crisis, that we can't keep pumping bitumen, burning bitumen, and putting it in the atmosphere. So I would target that.
I think we'll go over here to Courtney. Can everyone who is asking a question please say your name?
Sure. My name's Courtney Morrison. I work for Council of Canadians. I live in Halifax. Forgive my paraphrase and feel free to correct me, but I thought your comments about the far right kind of using our organizing tactics to scoop up people without a political home. Oh, sorry. Should I start at the beginning? Okay. I thought your comments about the far right kind of using our organizing tactics to scoop up people without a political home were really interesting. And, you know, we're all here meeting in person. You talked a little bit about going from online to offline, door knocking, talking to our neighbors, all kinds of things like that. But I'm just wondering if there are any other kind of classic organizing models or methods that you think are really pertinent at this time.
I've been telling the story of Walter Bregman. Is that his name? No, the book is called Moral Ambition. I'm getting all my people mixed up in my head. Anyways, the book Moral Ambition tells a story that I've been thinking about a great deal. They tried to figure out why some people stood up to the Nazis and other people didn't. After the war, everyone said they all stood up to the Nazis, which of course is absolutely false. But they tried to figure out, and they've done massive sociological studies. Was it because some people were religious and some people not? No. Some people educated more? No. Less educated? No. Urban, rural? No. They found this one village in Holland saved more Jewish families than anywhere else. So they did a study there. And in the study, they realized that it came down to one person who started it, Arnold Dowis, who was a bit of a maverick and a bit of a screw-up probably in traditional life, but he hated Nazis. And so what they realized was that the vast majority of people who stood up to fight the Nazis did so because someone asked them to help. They didn't necessarily want to, but someone asked them and said, I need you. So in this village, it became, they called it the theory of zeros, ones, and twos. So Arnold Dowis was the zero. He was the original. And he started to bug people, and he found this guy named Max Leon who worked with him, and he became the one, so 0 and 1. But when you have two together, you don't have two, you have 2,000, because you become unbeatable. So they went from 0 to 1 to a second person, from 2 to 4, 4 to 8. It's like a contagion of activism. What made the story of this village, Newlanda was the village, what made it so powerful was the vast majority of people who were asked continued to do it. Only a small minority did it once. None of these people would have done it if they hadn't been pressured. And some of them didn't want to do it. Some of them were shamed into it. Some of them were prodded and poked. But it's asking people. And I think that that's the power. I'm a real believer that change happens the best with people who've never been involved in change before. That the mistake we made, and we professionalized social activism. You know, we have professional organizers, we have professional people, they teach you the message box. Like, the people that I worked with on Adam's Mind, they didn't do any message box. It was the night when CBC came up and Fran Nychuk, who was a farm woman, and they said, what are you going to do if they come? She said, I'm not going home. I won't go home till this is done. We knew then all of Canada was coming to fight the Adam's Mind because she was a normal woman, and they looked at her and said, she's doing the right thing. I'm going to be. She didn't have all the spin. So we build change by bringing people in who haven't done it and encourage them and make them feel they can do it. And we empower that. And that's how we start to build movements. The movements where you're not relying on the message box and the spin doctors and the professionals. What you learn, what you need from them are what are the tactics to build. But change happens when you touch people who never thought they'd do this before. Those are all the great union fights, the organizing fights. You win those when you get someone on the assembly line who's never done it before, but who just has that spark, and you see that spark in someone, you find a way to encourage them. And they're going to say no. They're going to say, I can't do that. But you keep poking, and I mean, I'll tell you, the amount of people who phoned and bugged me to run for politics, it's like, I ain't doing that. Are you nuts? So maybe I'm meandering on this, but I'm convinced that we have this opportunity, but we have to get out of our comfortable group. We got to find people to bring in. And once you bring them in, you got to give them a reason to come in, and you got to give them a reason to do something. And some of them are going to become the future leaders that we need right now.
Britt, I wonder if you have any organizing tactics that have been really successful or powerful or meaningful for you.
I'm sorry,
if you have any suggestions of organizing tactics that have been really meaningful or impactful in your work.
I mean, I think in the beginning the Take Back the Night marches were a really important tool, partly because, again, it was women just, like in the early days, we didn't apply for parade permits, we just went out and marched because everyone's safe with a police escort. So we would go out without the police escort, and we would go out at night, and I think the visuals of those kinds of things, maybe the theater of it. I think the people in Portland who are dressing up in the inflatable outfits, that is just such a brilliant tool. It is so disarming. And you're taking all of the power because you're making them look foolish. So I think being creative is really important. I think there's lots of room for guerrilla theater and all kinds of things.
Yeah, we used on Adam's Mine, because when I was in grade 7, Mr. Comper made me stand up and said he was tired of me being an idiot in his class. And that if I was going to be an idiot, he wanted a smart idiot. And he wanted me to learn how to be a disruptor, so he told me to read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. And Alinsky, his thing was humor. Once you're laughing at them, they never quite have the same power again. So humor is better than anger. Going out and shouting, everyone can shout. Like the Portland thing is brilliant, right? We did all kinds of stuff. So one of the things we did on the Adams Mine, we were going to go down and hold this big press conference, and the kids at the local high school, Mel Lastman was the mayor, and Mel Lastman got all these stupid moose, colored painted moose in Toronto. It was like the dumbest thing anyone ever thought of. It's like, who's ever heard of a moose in Toronto? So the kids at the local high school decided they wanted to make a moose out of garbage. So they made this garbage moose, and it was really funny. So then we put it on a flatbed truck. And we went to Toronto to do something else, but the only thing people wanted to see was the garbage moose. So then it became Mel the Garbage Moose, and then we toured Ontario with Mel the Garbage Moose and signed up people, and it was hilarious because we were and then everybody in rural Ontario got to make fun of Toronto and their stupid moose sculptures, and we had Mel the Moose, and then so Mel the Moose became the model, right? And it was just because people got to laugh at the power. So humor, finding ways to sort of take down there we did that. That was the kind of stuff we were brainstorming that stuff all the time. So.
Jenn Pfenning, Local 340. So I know that you've talked a bit about food on some of your Midas Touch, or Midas Canada, YouTube videos. Food sovereignty is what we talk about. It's what we are best positioned to take action on. But would you be willing to do one of your shows about food sovereignty?
You guys have no idea how smart I'm about to sound when I do my next one, because I was just cribbing notes all day. No, I mean, the food sovereignty thing is big. And we talked to rural people who said talk about it, and we were talking at supper. There's connections that we don't often make. But when I was at the UFCW, there were American union organizers who came up to talk to me about supply management. And they were like, man, if you let supply management go, do you know what you're getting? Do you know what it's like in those chicken slaughtering plants in the southern United States? You're going to flood your market with that. Right now, you've got safe supply of chicken, you've got union jobs, you've got farms. And it was the American union guys who were telling me this. So then when I did a thing on supply management and the price of eggs and food sovereignty, it's knowing those facts, you know. So I'd really like to get more from you guys, that we could start to get that out, because people want to know. Like they want to know, how do we do this? How do we educate ourselves? This is a time to be educated.
I'd be really happy to get you our 6-point plan that we presented to Carney just before the election.
Does it have pictures? Britt will actually read the full plan. I'll skim it.
I think we're going to go over here to Paul. Yeah.
Hi, Wyan. Nice to see you up there. And hi. Thanks for your presentation. I wanted to invite you to maybe envision on an organizational level with the NDP, what would it look like if you had an Indigenous woman as a leader? And what are some of the steps that you as an organization could take to make that happen?
I'm going to say that the Democratic Party isn't really new. Sometimes it's not really democratic, and it's not much of a party to hang out with. I believe that a party has to be based on a leader who's willing to run and represent and win. I don't think you choose a leader based on anything other than the fact that they're willing to stand up and represent. Because you need someone who's willing to take that job on. So if an Indigenous woman's ready and wants to do it, I'm there. But we need a party. We've got to get people elected. And we stopped electing people some time ago. We got to find out why they're not being elected. To me, the question is, why did we stop having grassroots? Why did we stop having our riding associations matter? You know, why did we believe that our base was an ATM machine and that we could get some good spin and people would all come out and vote for us? They're not voting for us. So I don't think unless we change that, it matters who you put in for leader. Social democratic movement has to be social and democratic. So let the base decide, build it up, and then the leaders will come forward. But the mistake the NDP has been making is deciding, well, let's choose someone who will do that, and everything else will work out. I think, like everything else, we've got to build it from the base. So if there's a person that you think should be running, you've got to talk to them and get them to run. And they've got to put forward a vision, and then I'm there, all the way. There's 5 right now, so yeah, so.
Glenn Norman, Alberta. I have kind of a question that I'm a little troubled by your statement that Mark Carney is on the record that he doesn't want to burn more bitumen, keep burning more and more. The first project he announced on his nation-building project was the Pathway Alliance. What the Pathway Alliance is really for is not to pump CO2 deep down into the earth. It is for producing and bringing back to life these old SAG-D operations that have depleted out. CO2 is the greatest source for reducing the viscosity in these formations. This is an ecological disaster waiting to happen. It is one of the worst projects, and I think his approval of that goes completely against what you stated, that he is on the record that he doesn't want to keep burning bitumen. This has the potential to double the production in Alberta. And it wasn't profitable enough for the oil companies to do it on themselves. So they've sold this as a way of dealing with greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
And this is an entirely false solution. And I'm just a little troubled about you saying he's on the record he doesn't burn more bitumen, because that is exactly the purpose of this. And as far as the CO2 injecting it in the ground, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked anywhere on Earth. Even in Norway, where they thought it was so successful, it turns out the plume is rising back to the surface. So I want your thoughts on that, please.
Sorry, I needed to correct myself. Mark Carney's on the record of saying climate change is the existential threat of our time. I put the bitumen thing in because of him supporting the expansion of bitumen burning, because it is, right now, it's the dirtiest fuel on the planet. He did not say he was against bitumen burning, but he said that climate crisis was the existential threat. So if it's the existential threat, then you don't go with these projects, because this is massively going to increase. And I've dealt with Pathways Alliance many, many, many times. They don't even try. They don't even try to pretend that they care whether they burn the planet. You know, when I deal with mining companies, I'm just going to be brutal. They always bring like an indigenous person, and then the woman with the scarf. She always has a scarf, and she sort of represents like their climate thing, and they always talk about their green. And man, Pathways Alliance, they don't even bother. They did for a while. Well, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, they would sort of put on a bit of a front. Now they don't. They're not interested. They don't care. They're going to burn the planet. They're making money, and they expect us to give it to them. So Mark Carney should not be doing this project because he's on the record as saying this is the existential threat of the world right now. So that's what makes him different to me as a leader. We have to hold those words accountable to him. So anyways.
I think we're going to take the last question
Right
over here.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Aaron Shantz. I'm from New Brunswick here, and I really appreciate a lot of the ideas you guys have had and the thought process around, you know, how we can make change happen and stuff like that. And you guys have a lot of experience taking on mining, taking on big industry and stuff like that. And I feel like we should take advantage of the fact that this conversation is actually happening in New Brunswick. So I wanted to bring up a New Brunswick issue. Our biggest issue, I think, is kind of like is the feudal system in New Brunswick. You probably know about the Irving family and the McCains, and we're not fighting against industry here. We're not fighting against politicians because our politicians are completely in bed with them. It's pretty obvious. I mean, anyways, we don't have to get into that. The thing is how do you take on an oligarchy, a family, where you're not taking on an organization, you're taking on a family that has a really strong web, a complete control over the economy. How do you fight back? Because we don't fight back in New Brunswick because everyone's job's at stake. There's too much power. And in New Brunswick, and I think in Nova Scotia too, and Maine and PEI through McCain's and the potato industry, people don't know how to fight back against this. People are too scared. Politicians are too scared. The NFU, New Brunswick, isn't able to. We're tiny, we're small. It doesn't matter what we do, they never listen. And yeah, so that's a question. It's a different kind of fight.
Well, it definitely is. It would need a lot of breaking down and figuring out and choosing moments. But, you know, I come from mining country, and Inco was the most hated company anywhere. And then it was taken over, thanks to Stephen Harper. And we used to say about Inco that they were sons of bitches, but at least they were our sons of bitches. And then when Inco went down and Falconbridge went down, and then they were taken over, Vale took over. Vale's like one of the biggest mining companies in the world. And suddenly, those sons of bitches were owning mining operations. They could shut us down tomorrow. You know, this is the power of the danger of embedding power in a few hands, right? Because there is no ability to negotiate. When these companies become so big, they could just shut your community down and it wouldn't matter. Right now you have the Wajea family, they bought the Pictou Mill in Nova Scotia. The Liberal government let these guys take over mill after mill after mill. Their track record is a nightmare. They're based in Shanghai, apparently. They control about 56 million acres of Canadian forests, so they could shut down any of our mill towns now. And Philip Champagne said, oh, we did the net benefit test. Well, what's the net benefit test when one company can control so much production? So New Brunswick is the story, right? You've lived this. And how we take that back is a much bigger and broader conversation. And I think we need to be looking at why did we give up these little mill towns, and why did we give up these local and regional resources to more and more powerfully consolidated groups, because they're not going to have the best interests of our communities at heart. So.
Thanks.
So I think that is bringing us to time. So I'm going to wrap things up. I want to thank again the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, the Government of Prince Edward Island, and the Government of Canada for funding the NFU's 2025 convention keynote address. I think that Charlie and Britt are going to stick around for a little bit. And
sign books.
And sign books.
Sell product.
Which I think are available over there. And I just want to say a big thank you from, I think, all of us here for sharing with us. And I think, sharing your insights and experiences from a lifetime of activism and commitment to social and environmental justice. And I think there's a lot for us to be bringing into our own struggle for food sovereignty. And I think a lot that we're going to continue to engage with over the next couple of days. And so I think this has been just really wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing. And I invite a big round of applause.
Thank you.
If I could just say one last thing. Thank you for inviting us, but I've met so many smart people today that it was really encouraging, I think, for us to come here and meet all of you as well. Wow, bright folks, so thank you.
So keep doing it.
Thank you. That was really great.